And welcome to the informal session of the Virginia Beach Planning Commission, September 9th, 2020 meeting. I'm Dee Oliver, and I'm the chairman, and with me are 5 of our commissioners today. We have a few people absent, and so we'll go ahead and get started with our planning director. Bobby?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few comments. I do want to say again, thank you for powering through the month of August with us. I know it was not easy, and I do apologize from the city staff for that snafu, but we do plan on doing better with it, and I do owe you a lot of gratitude for your assistance with getting us through that. We still do have a large item to be heard by council, which you do not have to be a part of. It's Westminster of Canterbury will be on September 22nd for a special meeting all by itself. But we should be back on track. Yesterday, if you had the opportunity to watch the informal session of council, Mr. Wood and Mr. Jones presented or handed out their alterations to the short-term rental ordinance that they plan on referring to the Planning Commission. At the request, it will be done straight public hearing, Planning Commission, public hearing, City Council, but I will provide the information to you today. I do have draft copies of it. Kevin and I have been taking a look at it. I tried to get it all organized this morning, but it was in multiple different documents, so I was having trouble getting it done. Essentially, what it would do is it would allow short-term rentals to be permitted by right if it meets all the criteria that are set forth, which includes some handful of new criteria, in portions of Shore Drive, not all of it, just pieces closer to that they would typically be, the North End Overlay District, and as well as the OR Form-Based Code District, where it would be by right, where we would just, the planning would just issue, or zoning staff would issue a permit for it, and we would be able to check on it. No more conditional use permits. Everywhere else it would not be permitted in the city, except for Sandbridge, of course. Sandbridge has its own cutout in the state code. So,
Does that permit that it gets, does it have an expiration date on it, or is it just?
so that'll be part of the discussion that we'll have. Those are some of the details we need to figure out. There are a couple things that we need that I know that Ms. Henley was looking for, and a few other folks that may need it to expire yearly so that the person updates with us and pays a fee so that we can get inspections of decks and things like that. Those things are not a part of this. It's just trying to clamp down on the use.
Because I know, yeah, Norfolk was, they just had their problem, in the paper. They're trying to figure theirs out as well. And I didn't know, does it, now, one of the questions, and I know we're not supposed to get off on all of this, but just out of curiosity, does that run with the land, or does it run with the person who has the permit?
Yes, it's both technically. So 241.2 says that each person, when there's a new owner or a new operator for the short-term rental, they're required to submit their information. So there is a condition that requires them to resubmit. But if you meet the criteria, you meet the criteria. There's no more conditional use permit. So.
Yeah.
I don't want to go off too deep either, but I do have a couple of questions. So I was talking to Mr. Jones and Mr. Wood about this, and I know this is coming forward. So will it be September, October-ish?
We're anticipating it being on your October agenda.
October, okay. And I know you were saying some other council members want some other things done in the ordinances also. Can we get it all at one time? So, because I know, I'm not trying to, because, if we keep, it's going to keep going farther and farther and farther out because they're going to, want to do things, or can we get it all at one time, or is that not possible?
I think there's a hope for right now to clamp down on the use a little bit, and then to feel our way through the rest of the
Okay,
pieces.
that's fine.
So,
I got a feeling it's going to be like that anyway for a while.
right. But this will definitely remove the burden of the conditional use permit, but only limit it to very specific areas in the city.
Right.
So, okay. With that, again, hopefully by around lunchtime, I'll have that, at least the maps printed out for you, and then I'll send the email with all the draft language that's proposed right now. Again, it is still draft. But it will be the same language that was handed out to City Council yesterday during their informal session. Okay.
And was there a conversation about adding overlays into those other areas?
It would need to be at the request of the community. So
Okay.
this is just it's just more setting the groundwork for that
Okay.
set up. Okay. All right, going on with our briefings agenda, we'll have Andy Friedman, our Director of Neighborhood, of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation, come up. Andy's been working very hard with the Housing Advisory Board and his staff to come up with a housing strategy, neighborhood strategy for us.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Andy Friedman from Housing and Neighborhood Preservation. And with me is Karen Percillo, our Housing Development Administrator, who organizes the Housing Advisory Board and leads the development of the Housing and Neighborhood Strategy. So, I guess this will advance.
Just this one.
Oh, sorry. So today I wanted to update the commission on the development of the strategy, and as Bill pointed out, we're about 6 months behind due to the pandemic. We were going to come here in spring, but we're happy to be back here now and talking about it. The advisory board also delayed its consideration of this. So we're working with the Housing Advisory Board, which hopefully you know is a council-appointed body that's charged with creating a housing and neighborhood strategy. And of course, the critical part and why we're here is that a housing and neighborhood strategy really has to completely coordinate with a comprehensive plan on those issues that are land use related. So we're going to talk about the Housing Advisory Board itself, what a strategy is, affordable housing, a little bit about housing gaps, a little bit about successes, and then the future considerations. So this is the membership of our Housing Advisory Board, and their job is to advise the manager and council about the implementation of strategies to address issues of housing affordability, overall housing development, and neighborhood preservation. And many of the members are past members of this commission. So what is a strategy, a housing and neighborhood strategy? So what we want to do is define a long-term approach to achieving the city's goals for housing and neighborhoods, addressing the threats to our neighborhoods, which we all know and experience what those real and perceived threats are. Threats to our neighborhoods include lack of public safety, flooding is a major threat. People perceive certain types of development as threats to their neighborhood. And then we want to take the action that is appropriate for government to take, as well as to stimulate private sector action. So this is not purely what the city does, but we want to make sure that everyone who has the ability to act is moving in the right direction. Housing strategy also includes preservation of affordable housing as well as future development. Neighborhood preservation is really its own activity, which identifies many of the things that keep neighborhoods vibrant, well-maintained places to live. And we also, and this is really a key overlap with the comp plan, guides future development that helps achieve city goals for affordability and neighborhood preservation. So you've seen this chart in the past. We see the comprehensive plan as the way forward to protecting our neighborhoods from threats and taking advantage of opportunities and strengths in our city that support our goals, achieving the goals of expanding quality affordable housing opportunities, achieving rising property values for owners, achieving safe and vital neighborhoods, protect neighborhoods from flooding, providing effective transportation options, and certainly maintaining a quality natural environment. All of those are pretty straightforward goals that the comprehensive plan already enumerates and council talks about very often. And so the housing strategy part of that's not all the housing strategy, it's much bigger than that. But in the context of the comprehensive plan, we want to talk about those particular housing issues that are part of that. So one of the critical things about a housing and neighborhood strategy is to define, well, what's affordable housing? So there's really two answers to that question. One is, how is it affordable? And the other is, what is it physically? In the affordability part, which is not up on this chart, but Affordability means the people who occupy it can afford it based on paying 30% of their income or less for that housing. It really has no relationship to the actual cost of the housing or who's living it or anything like that. It's, do the people in it pay 30% or less of their income towards the cost of that housing? The second part of it is, what is it physically? It can be anything. We have scattered throughout the city affordable housing units that are owned by nonprofit organizations that are affordable to the people who live in them because of the way they've been financed. They've been financed with federal funds, or they have the person living there has a Section 8 voucher. That is affordable housing to the people who live there. So there's no specific physical entity that you can call affordable housing. It can be anything. We also have apartment communities, and I'm going to show you pictures of some of them, which are fully affordable. That is 100% of the units within them are affordable to the people who occupy them. There's also mixed income developments where some are affordable and some are market rate. I mentioned the scattered site housing. We certainly have a lot of affordable senior housing and developments scattered around the city, and then housing for people with special needs. And if you look at the picture on the bottom right of that slide, that is really nicely developed affordable housing that is operated by the Department of Human Services and the Virginia Beach Community Development Corporation for people with special needs who are clients of the Department of Human Services. A couple of key concepts regarding affordability. And the top one, I think, for me, is absolutely the most important. People are not defined by their current income. People don't stay and become a low-income person, and that's how you classify them for the rest of their life, or that is really the meaningful part of what they are today. In my generation, many of our parents would be considered low income today. Many of our parents were postal workers, teachers, farmers, laborers in the 40s and 50s. And they were not high-income people, but they became solidly middle-class people with government policies in the 1950s. Calling them for the rest of their lives low income is just as incorrect as calling anybody whose income is what it is today anything, and defining them by that. The other really important thing, affordable housing needs to improve and contribute to the community. In Virginia Beach, we do not trade quality for affordability. We insist, and our department has the opportunity to insist that when housing is affordable, it also has to meet all community standards and codes. And we enforce the codes uniformly across the city. Whether it's luxury housing or affordable housing, everything has to come up to code. The third thing is that affordable housing is not for other people. It is for people who work in this building. It's for people throughout the community in various life stages. It's for people with special needs. It's for anyone who needs that at that time in their life. And the last part, I'm going to talk about this one more, is no one notices if affordable housing is there first. That is, it's always about who was there first. And I'm going to show you multiple instances. In fact, on the right side of that picture, the apartment complex on the right side of that slide is Cloverleaf Apartments, which houses 60 formerly homeless persons. That was built in about 2007 or 8 on Military Highway. And right after it was built, a very large market rate, not luxury, but market rate apartment complex was built right behind it, within walking distance. We didn't hear any word about how that was going to be detrimental to the people's quality of life. They didn't even know it was there. They shouldn't. There's no reason to know. There's other examples of that as well we'll talk about. So we are now in the steps toward adopting a strategy. The goal is to have something that eventually City Council will adopt, that this Commission will adopt first, and then City Council will, and the Housing Advisory Board. So we're hoping to have a draft strategy maybe by October, and then have a briefing, another briefing for you where we go into more details about what the strategy says, have certainly many public input opportunities, and hopefully by February we can vote on adoption of that. And we make sure to coordinate with Bobby and the adoption of the comp plan and making sure we don't do anything that's contradictory or gets in the way of that process as well. So this is just a very, very small summary of gaps that we see, the gaps between people's wages and their income and their ability to afford housing in Virginia Beach. So the top portion says the average wages of employees in 9 of the top 10 industries in Virginia Beach, classified by how many people are employed in those industries, were too low to afford the median rent of $1,200. This is now 6 years old, unfortunately, but that's the study that we had done that's in the process of being updated. But that means a single earner in most of the industries that employ most of the people in Virginia Beach did not pay enough to a single earner so that they could pay less than 30% of the income for rent. There is a need, based on that information, there is a need for about 22,000 additional units of affordable rental housing. An additional unit doesn't necessarily mean one is constructed. It just means that a subsidy is provided or one is built that is affordable. And when we get further along in updating this, we'll bring you back a more detailed update of that study so you can see more of the information about what affordability gaps are out there. So why is it difficult to have affordable housing? Well, Virginia Beach has always had high land costs, and we continue to. And there's some good things about that. That means people's property is valuable, and they have equity in their homes. The rezoning process is a big challenge, and every time a development needs to come through the rezoning process, it increases cost and risk, and we just saw that recently. Perceptions of what affordable housing is, which I tried to talk about a little bit before, and people's understanding of the cost both of providing affordable housing and what happens when you don't have it and people are struggling financially. So there's really 2 ways to achieve affordable housing in the city, in any city, and one of them is a project-by-project approach. That is, someone finds a parcel of land, they develop a proposal for that. That proposal needs to come through the rezoning process and is either approved or disapproved. But it is the most common one that we see, really. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of those and show you the successes that we've had in Virginia Beach. And I will say we've had some very reasonable amount of successes in Virginia Beach with these affordable housing developments. There's also the systematic approach. A systematic approach means we categorize things and say, if you do X, Y, and Z, then your project can be approved. One of those was and we're going to go into more about those, the workforce housing program, which was put into law back in 2007 or 8, which provided guidelines for how you could create a mixed income community systematically in various places in the city. So in project-by-project affordable housing development, the city has been very creative and used pretty much all the tools there are to help make projects happen. Financing tools, the city often builds infrastructure and sells land for affordable housing. We provide letters of support to funders and financiers, and they also the designation of a revitalization area, partnerships with developments and nonprofits, and also in the case of the Housing Resource Center, we actually built it ourselves as the city. Financing and vouchers include city funds, federal funds, vouchers that provide affordability for the people who have the voucher, and also targeted housing that's specifically for people with disabilities. And so we're going to give you some examples of these. All of the following examples might not have been in the last 7 years, but maybe a little bit before that. I think we have one that was older than that. So Cedar Grove Apartments is a 32-unit development for formerly homeless or handicapped, disabled veterans only. There are 32 units for veteran households with veterans in those classifications, built by Virginia Beach Community Development Corporation in the Bayside District. A unique project, the first of its kind in the nation, that was dedicated to veterans. Crescent Square Apartments, 80 units, all affordable housing units, for 42 of them for previously homeless persons. These are all single efficiency apartments. This is on Diamond Springs Road, and this building was built, opened in about 2016. This is one of the examples of if affordable housing is there first, no one notices. The luxury or high-end apartments built on the other side of Northampton were built after this was in place. In addition, the really nice apartments across Diamond Springs were built after this was in place. But one might imagine what would have happened if this was proposed after those were in place. We actually had a lot of community opposition to this, but council still approved it by a 10-to-1 vote. This is 200 West Apartments that just opened in the last year, developed by the Franklin Johnson Group. These are 264 units. 100% of these are affordable housing. That means the people who live there do not pay more than 30% of their income, and the rent amounts are controlled by the financing. There are also people with special needs, and there's about 20 or so units reserved for people with disabilities. The city contributed a lot to this, including vouchers from our department and development of infrastructure to make this possible. This is the Housing Resource Center. You're very familiar with that. There are 30 units of affordable apartments located in a building, in a portion of this building, and they serve formerly homeless persons as well. So this example probably goes in the next section, which is the systematic approach. This is Seaside Harbor, 76 units built by the Lawson Companies, all of them affordable to the people who live there, a really high-quality development. This was really made possible by the form-based code and nothing else. It did not need a conditional use permit or a rezoning to be constructed, and that's part of the reason. It's one of the densest developments in the city with 76 units on less than an acre. And if you said that density to people today, or almost any time that I've been in Virginia Beach, they say, oh, that's not possible in Virginia Beach. But it was possible with form-based code, and it's been very, very well accepted by everyone. Renaissance Apartments, just in the process of opening on Witch Duck Road next to the Renaissance Academy on Witch Duck Road, another done by the Franklin Johnson Group. And this is a mixed income development where there are market rate, partially kind of lower end market rate, as well as affordable units in this development. And the city and the school board sold this land for this development. So systematic approaches that the city has taken. We, back in 1994, developed the reduced parking requirements for the senior and disabled housing. In 1997, we adopted the in-law suite zoning code and accessory dwelling units. In 2003, the strategic growth areas specifically allowed increased density. 2007, we did a reduced parking allowance for SROs, or efficiency apartments, and adopted the workforce housing program. And 2012, the form-based code. All of those are in the code that specifically are designed to allow higher density and or affordability. So that's everything that's a kind of very quick summary of affordable housing and what the challenges are and what the successes have been to date. In our discussions at the Housing Advisory Board, we've invited multiple developers and housing advocates to come and talk to us And, as a result of those, and as a result of learning some of the stuff that I just showed you, Virginia Beach really has been successful in and supportive of a lot of affordable housing. Over 2,500 units have been approved through the project-by-project development process in the last 25 years. That's probably a need for more, but very few have been denied. There's a few, but not that many. But what we know is that the best way and the most guaranteed way to make it happen is to allow it by right. That's why Seaside Harbor was built, and it probably would not have been built if it needed to go through the rezoning process. So what we're thinking about, and these are not proposals at this point, but these are what, we see from studying what's been happening and listening to the developers, is that we need to allow more by-right housing development that can include affordability with requirements for for meeting criteria. And it's almost like Bobby was saying about short-term rentals. If you have the right criteria, then you should be able to just build it. And that's what we're talking about as one of the options. And if you do that, if you increase options for density, you can require and/or incentivize affordability. Many cities have also taken the approach of expand areas where accessory dwelling units and in-law suites are possible. On the long-term view, those will over time make more housing available, especially if they're not required to be your relative who lives in the in-law suite. And then define the criteria for revitalization areas. I know that's been a big topic here for a while. But revitalization areas, if we had more criteria, again, the controversy would die down and people would either meet it or they wouldn't. So these are some of the ideas that are out there that we want to talk about as part of the housing strategy. And that kind of brings me to the end of my briefing, and be happy to answer your questions.
I have a question. Mr. Freeman, I've talked to a developer that thinks like you do, and without going through the conditional use permit process and being built by right as long as he has the right criteria. And my question to him was, well, how do you do that without going through a public process of briefing them and telling what's going on, the public input process? I mean, I think it's a great idea, because there's some locations in the city that could actually be done like that, but they'd still need a conditional use permit as of right now. So I just what your thoughts are on that.
So I think it would be an administrative process, just like Seaside Harbor went through, where if you meet the form-based code criteria, then you can build what you propose to build. And while we are very used to thinking about, and I am very used to thinking about the need for public input, it is kind of shifting the balance a little between the rights of the owner and the rights of the neighbors. Mm-hmm. So that if the owner meets the criteria for what can be built on that site, they're free to build it. And that's a bit of a shift for everyone, I think, that we'll have to get to.
I'm with you. I think it should be done like that personally, but there's a lot of people in the city that don't think that way.
And I would just say, because the next thing we hear is, this is not advocating for high-density development in suburban neighborhoods. It's advocating for defined areas which would be appropriate. And I think we have the SGAs, and then there are certainly areas along our major corridors where we've seen high-density development. For instance, the Dragus development on Princess Anne Road, not an SGA, but a very high-density apartment development right there at whatever that road is, and very appropriate. So there's areas along the major corridors, again, which could be considered for, administrative approval based on criteria.
I agree.
Like I said, this is not our proposal at this point. This is one of the ideas that's very obvious based on experience we've had in the city.
I like the idea of bringing it out and talking about it, because we've never done that.
And Mr. Weiner, just the key to doing that is to do the public outreach in the front end, right? And so we go and do the outreach to provide the find out from the public what are the things that they would want from a development. To Mr. Friedman's point, the people get their heads wrapped around the other people discussion rather than what would you want there. And so there's discussion, and I forgot to mention this earlier. The mayor noted at the end of the informal session also that Ms. Henley and Mr. Rouse would be kind of leading a infill redevelopment kind of working group to couple, which sounds like it should couple directly with this, because as Mr. Friedman said, there's a lot of commercial corridors that have shifting kind of retail and commercial uses, and they're prime areas where they can handle the burden or they're already designed to handle traffic and other infrastructure issues. So that will be coming along as well after that discussion yesterday too.
Good.
Yes, Jack?
Yeah, I think it sounds like there are good opportunities there to, focus, redevelopment, and, and like you say, incentivize, development through form-based, code and, certain areas that, are already kind of slated for that type, not necessarily type, but, for growth. And, so, yeah, everything that you've said, sounds very appropriate to, the direction that I think we'd want to go.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Andy. It's been, Andy and I've worked on the housing resource together with Karen, and it's, they both do a superb job of making sure that we have affordable housing in this city, and it's always been an honor to be sitting next to you at a table.
Thank
And
you.
that, so you're great at what you do, and you're great, you and Karen are definitely a great asset to the city of Virginia Beach.
Thank you
So,
very much,
thank
Madam
you.
Chairman. Okay.
All right. Madam Chair, next briefing will be by Emily Archer and Janai Zabadwa from our SGA office. They'll be presenting the resort area outdoor cafe franchise regulations. During kind of the shifting and movement of the resort management kind of functions, for those that aren't aware, the SGA office took over the franchise agreement kind of process at the oceanfront for businesses that wanted to encroach in the public right-of-way. Also, along with that, they took on RAC and a few other of the subcommittees. So Emily has been tasked to do an update to these regulations, and she's going to brief you on these.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
I'm Emily Archer. I'm an urban designer with the Planning Department's Strategic Growth Area Office. I'm here today with Janai Zabadwa, also a planner with me in the Strategic Growth Area Office. Thank you for having me. We're here to kind of brief you on the major kind of overhaul of these franchise regulations that we've been working on diligently for the past 6 months or so. They do not typically come before Planning Commission, these outdoor cafe franchise reviews, but we wanted you to be aware of them, so it's really an informal briefing. This is really a program solely for outdoor cafes on public property at the resort. It's all they apply to, so you're aware.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Why just at the resort? Just because that's your part of what you all do with SGA? I mean, not throughout the whole city?
So the only other place in the city where outdoor cafes are permitted on public property are at Town Center, and there they're handled as an encroachment process through Public Works Real Estate. Historically, that's how it's.
With COVID coming out right now, it seems the outdoor cafe is a huge hit.
It is. This is unrelated to our separate temporary outdoor cafe program that was enacted by council in May to allow for expanded outdoor temporary dining only for COVID-related pandemic restrictions. After that, this will be the way to do it.
Right, okay, just curious.
Great. So this program's been around 35 years. It was established in 1985 by the Resort Area Commission to introduce opportunity for existing cafes to exist on city property at the resort area. It's been amended many times over the past 35 years, but hasn't been substantially updated since 2009. So we've kind of overhauled it a little bit, but the primary purpose remains to promote a welcoming ambiance for shopping and dining experience and serve as a public amenity while supporting health, safety, and general welfare of residents, visitors in the resort area. So we were asked in early 2020 by businesses and resort stakeholders to relook at the regulations because there was barriers identified within the existing regulations hindering their ability to to use new and innovative materials and operate within the current standards. So kind of what it looks like now. We've really kind of reorganized the document to get rid of some of the redundancies and made it more user-friendly and visually compelling. We've consolidated the CAFÉ categories as they existed. I'll go through all of these a little bit further, but it's kind of the summary and the main points here. But we've expanded the eligibility, who can actually get a CAFÉ franchise, and tried to provide more of that flexibility that was requested in materials and construction types. We've conformed the document a little bit more to align with our current Race App 2030 update that was recently adopted, and other ABC and local and state regulations, and then try to, as much as we could, to streamline the application process. There's currently 47 restaurants with outdoor cafe franchises at the oceanfront. There's 5 different categories. Some are more popular than others, and you'll see there's actually 56 franchise agreements because one of the categories is if you're a boardwalk or a connector park, and a lot of them are corner restaurants that have both, so you have to have 2 agreements for both, and there's nuances in what's permitted. And then there's like 3 different type of sidewalk ones. There's none west of Pacific Avenue, although that was added. So one of our main tasks was thinking to streamline this for administrative and just so understandability, was maybe we can consolidate it into 2 basic types, a boardwalk condition and a sidewalk condition. We kept the sidewalk conditions a little separate west of Pacific Avenue because you're in more into the neighborhoods there, so there's more, there's a couple different, really only 3 different distinctions west of Pacific Avenue. Really it's more, you can't have outdoor music after 10 p.m. because you're closer to the neighborhoods there, and we wanted to keep the franchise fees a little lower west of Pacific to encourage more of those longs since we currently have 0. The boundaries really haven't changed, but there was never a map before, so now there's a map. Really, it's any property that's zoned OR or RT is eligible for a CAFÉ franchise on public property, but now we have a map that kind of shows that. It's basically from Pacific Avenue East throughout the resort area with Central Beach out to Bird Neck Road, the Alaskan Gateway Corridor, and then Winston-Salem, the south side of Winston-Salem, in South Beach. So currently eligible parcels, I just mentioned, are those zoned OR-RT, but they have to be fully, full weight service with served on non-disposable dishware. So fast casual or fast food are offering quick food service items are typically not eligible for this. But we have added a new eligibility criteria that provide exceptions for fast casual establishments that are fully certified green partners. This is a state-sponsored initiative that encourages green practices in all aspects of the tourism industry. You might be more familiar with the local Pearl Business Program by Lynnhaven River Now. There is a reciprocity agreement between Virginia Green and Pearl businesses, so if you're already a Pearl business, you can apply to be a Virginia Green partner without having to go through the full certification process, so it should be easy for somebody to meet this eligibility requirement. I'm going to let Janiza walk you through that. She was out there in February and visited all 47 restaurants to kind of check, as we took over the program, to see what we were dealing with, to understand what was most out of compliance, to help us inform the updates to the regulations.
Good morning. My name is Janiza Badwa. Thank you, Emily. So I'll be speaking on the site requirements, the revised site requirements for these outdoor cafes. So the audit we conducted helped us identify how many of these site requirements listed on the left column in the current regulations are being followed, and what can we do to get these up to date with current or modern standards and regulations. And there are some changes across these site elements, but the planting requirements, signs, perimeter fencing type, and canopies are the ones that needed our much needed attention. So for overhead structures, canopies or awnings varies in permissibility across these CAFÉ categories under the existing regulations. So, and a big part of the revision that Emily mentioned earlier is streamlining the management of these cafes. So in the revision, we are proposing to permit the uses of these overhead structures rather than requiring them. So when it is used, the cafe owners may fully or partially cover their cafe footprint, in the current regulations, if they are used, the cafe footprints has to be covered fully. And a soft top covering material is only to be used across these cafe types, with the exception of hard top and soft top covering material to be used in the boardwalk cafe type, which are namely cafes located in the connector park and the boardwalk. And as we've mentioned earlier, we are trying to align these regulations with current state and local standards. So for the signs, we are proposing to align the sign regulations with the form-based code sign standards, as you can see there. And for access, the permitted number of access is also being changed to have more than one means of ingress and egress according to the current ABC regulations, and which the access points has to be permitted by the ABC board and has to be also controlled by the licensee. For the perimeter barrier, in addition to the current permitted materials on the middle column, we are adding 2 more materials, such as the vinyl PVC with some restrictions, as you can see in the right side images, as well as aluminum fencing. So each cafe types, the boardwalk and sidewalk types, have special requirements in perimeter fencing. For boardwalk cafe type, the planting maximums width has been removed, which was 10 feet, and keeping the 5 feet width minimum across the boardwalk cafe types. And planters can also be used now in short distances upon review. And additionally, there's a couple more perimeter barrier materials that we are permitting in the boardwalk cafe type, which is the rope rails and continuous hedges. And for the sidewalk cafe type, we are requiring the use of perimeter plantings in either integrated perimeter barrier system, freestanding planters, or railing planters. And we hope that these revised requirements and better enforcement of these site regulations can better support the comprehensive beautification of the RACAP 2030. And I will give it back to Emily to talk about the franchise fees.
Thanks. So we really, just to wrap it up here, we are not changing the franchise fees. These were actually waived by council in May because of the pandemic, but you can see the existing published fee schedule and then what we're proposing in the new regulations. It really is not changing beyond the 3% increase that was already scheduled to increase, so no really fee increases beyond what was already published for the next several years. We looked at a lot of other cities across the nation, how they handled their sidewalk cafe programs. A lot of them are administratively approved or just the encroachment process. Norfolk's is an encroachment process, for instance. But because these are approved by council, found it difficult to, cut a lot of the review and approval that needs to go into these. But we're trying to include more city staff and departments up front when they first come in for their application to help streamline the process on the back end is the idea. So really, they submit an application with SGA office. We go through RAC's review and recommendations to council. They can submit, if they get that approval as we recommend it to council, they can apply for their building permit. We'll need to go to DSC for review for a right-of-way utilities and drainage permit if they're adding new impervious surface. And then those permits will be held pending council approval. And then lastly, we will accompany the permits and inspection office when we conduct the final inspection before their CO is issued to make sure they've built what the approved plans were. So we've been making the rounds. We were with RAC and its subcommittees in the past month. We've been to the Atlantic Avenue Association, Vibe, Restaurant Association. This is really the last one before council briefing, October 6th, and hopefully a vote for approval on October 20th. It is publicly posted on our website at vbgov.com/resort cafe or the main planning or SGA page if you'd like to check out the full regulations and our contact information. Any questions?
I got it, just. The hard, I guess, the hard canopies, what you called it?
Yeah, hard
Is
top.
that only on Boardwalk?
Correct, only on Boardwalk.
So this is, are we trying to promote a long-term stay or visits on the streets too? I mean, what happens to those canopies? Because what I noticed, after hurricanes, they got canopies and they just sit there blowing in the wind and they're going throughout the whole season, off-season, shoulder season, and then, I mean, have you guys thought about maybe allowing the hard rooftops or the metal rooftops
So
for the
our-
streets?
Correct. So currently, only temporary tops are permitted everywhere. We thought the main argument is because on this sidewalk condition is more, especially like Atlantic or Pacific or any of the streets, is more apt to be upgraded at some time with repairs in the right-of-way, and those right-of-ways are very constrained as they are now. So allowing a permanent overhead that might have to be removed for a construction project. You might have been hearing Atlantic Avenue needs redone in the next couple years, so all those cafes would have to be removed for the time of construction. So permitting a permanent hardtop adds expense and gives the owner a sense of permanency that they might not have in a right-of-way condition, whereas the greenbelt and the boardwalk is less likely to see that. And with building standards today, they do have to meet wind codes for those permanent tops. The idea was that, and it's easier to meet that today than it was when this program was established in 1985. So that's how the temporary fuel came along, and the goal of the program is to keep it outdoors when you have the hard top. We've seen a couple restaurants want to enclose them even more, put walls up then once they have the hard top. So again, it's really trying to meet the goal of the program, keeping this light outdoor open air feeling, especially on streets and right of way where it's already constrained for pedestrians and bikes and cars and, coming in from the building faces. So
Well, after, let's say, a storm hits and you have the wind blowing, the canopies, is there a time that permit person has to repair it? Who's the enforcer? Who's actually out there enforcing that they repair it in a timely manner so we don't have all this canopy flowing in the wind when during the off-season?
So, Mr. Alcaraz, what's going on now is that the, standing up at the direction of City Council, the new Resort Management Office, they will have staff that will be handling a more detailed approach to that, which will include keeping an eye on those things a little bit better than they have been
I
recently.
know we're trying to get long-term at the resort, so what I've seen in the past.
Right.
If they're not hard and they're just soft tops, they're blowing in the wind.
Right. We just need additional eyes to make sure that we're citing folks accordingly and having them remove them when they're not being utilized appropriately.
And then one last question is the fees, are they like year-round or is it just during the season?
it's a yearly fee that allows them to utilize city property to have their cafe on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yes, Jack.
I've got two things. One is, you mentioned, out of compliance, and you did a survey, and, I think it's great, the planting, looks like plantings are required at, for the boardwalk, and, and for the locations not on the boardwalk, or the planters. For that out of compliance, what was I know that there's an outcome of survey, but was it just a survey, or was there actual?
There are a couple of things. It was February, so a lot of the plants weren't doing their best in February, so we realized that. A lot of them weren't open or operable, so let me go back to that chart.
Right, and it wasn't just the plants, it was.
Yeah,
the
so a lot of
whole
it was, signage was a common thing, but that's kind of everywhere at the oceanfront that is out of compliance. So the planters were a big one. So we wanted to add definitely more flexibility to allow for different types of plantings that weren't permitted.
Mhm. But it was just more the out of compliance, what do you do for enforcement?
So one of our goals is hopeful with this update is, if this is adopted in October, as we hope it would be, send the new regulations to all the current franchisees to let them know that the regulations have been updated and there's more things that they could be doing. And then along with that, a letter that asks them to, before probably next season, to come into compliance with, especially a lot of it's just minor stuff that we can detail for them and help them come into compliance. But as Bobby mentioned, if we have another office that's handling the enforcement and helping us inspect these things, it would be easier to help them to come into compliance.
Okay.
Yes. Emily, thank you. I know through the PDRC, y'all have worked hard at streamlining this. It's been a sort of an eclectic group of cafes and fences and signs down there, and it's been difficult to sort of get it all put in place, and you all have done a great job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. Madam Chair, our last briefing is the Planning Commission Design Awards. Bill will be handling this, correct?
Yes, the formal presentation, of course, will be made at the formal hearing at 12 noon today.
Oh, okay. I guess that's it.
It wasn't supposed to be in the brief.
Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and do the agenda review then.
Okay, great.
Good morning. The first agenda, item 1, McNeil Properties, is requesting a 30-day deferral to the October 14th Planning Commission hearing, which would allow the applicant and staff to discuss their project a little further. And so we're going to just give a 30-day deferral for that one. So that won't be going until next month. Agenda item 2 is Latifa Privet. This is an application for a conditional use permit for a family daycare home located on Cherrywood Lane in the Green One neighborhood. The applicant is requesting to care for up to 12 children within the single-family dwelling. The 6,000 square foot parcel has an enclosed 6-foot tall fence surrounding the entire yard for children to play. The applicant has over 10 years' experience caring for children and will be the only caregiver associated with this home daycare. Staff finds the property to be organized and well-kept and is unaware of any opposition to this request. Staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions in the report. And I'll stand by for any questions you may have.
Okay. Any questions? This is Centerville. We don't have our Centerville person. Well, just on the fact that you all said that you found it organized.
Yes.
I do have some questions.
Yeah.
How many children does she really intend to host?
I asked her that question. She really intends to host 12 children, but that is determined by Virginia Department of Social Services. They will make that determination once they do their inspection. But her hope is to have 12.
So she's currently operating up to 4
Right.
children. Like, how's her relationship with the neighbors? Have you had any complaints?
I haven't had any complaints. No one's called in opposition, and so,
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thanks.
no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. Guess we'll go ahead and put this on consent.
Okay, the next item is agenda item 3, Dale Wooden. This is an application for a conditional use permit for a home occupation located on Blackwater Road in the southern part of the city. The applicant is requesting to offer training courses to U.S. military, local, and state organizations regarding cyber threats that stem from the use of electronic devices. The classes will be taught inside of the home in the living room. The classes will take place 5 days, once per month, from Monday through Friday between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30 p.m. The class sizes varies, with the most being up to 10 students per session. There will be no physical changes to the site to accommodate the use. There is ample parking on site, as the clients will park in the 1,500 square foot driveway and parking area. In staff's opinion, this use will not change the character of the neighborhood and will not adversely affect the surrounding properties, as the home occupation is only in operation for 5 days, once per month, and all activities are conducted indoors, similar to a typical family gathering. Staff is unaware of any opposition to the request and is recommending approval subject to the conditions in the report.
Okay. Mr. Barnes?
Yes, ma'am, consent.
Okay.
I have
Yes.
one thing. On the, it's just a minor thing. It's just on the schematic. It says asphalt driveway and parking area. It's actually concrete. So if,
Okay,
I don't know, for the next,
sure, we'll make that change.
take a look at that.
Okay.
Specific there, Jack. I'm just kidding.
Might as well change it if you can.
I'm just messing.
Okay.
The next item is item 4. The applicant is seeking a subdivision variance
to create 2 additional parcels for residential developments in the Princess Anne District. Since the proposed partial and residual partial will not meet the minimum 150 feet lot width and 120 feet street line frontage requirements of the AG1 and AG2 agriculture district, a variance is required. The subject parcel is 327 acres, was placed in the City Agriculture Reserve Program in 1998 with a single-family dwelling developed on the property. The agreement reserved 2 building sites, Eastman Exception Site 1 and Eastman Exception Site 2, for a total of 3 dwellings could be developed on the 327 acres parcel. The existing dwelling is located on the proposed parcel Site 1. It is the applicant's intent to demolish the dwelling and construct a new dwelling in its place, and to construct another dwelling on the proposed parcel Site 2 for a total of 2 dwellings. The proposed parcel 1 and residual parcel will have 0 feet of lot width and street line frontage, and the proposed parcel 2 will have 14.9 feet of lot width and street line frontage on Ives Road. All 3 parcels would be accessible by a 50 feet access easement that is paved and function as an extension of Ives Road. The proposed lot meets the zoning requirement for lot size and recommended density of 15 acres per unit in the agriculture district. Each proposed lot is over 1 acre in size and have an average density of 109 acres per unit. Staff find the proposal to be consistent with the Agricultural Reserve Program agreement and is not aware of any opposition to this request. Staff is recommending approval subject to the condition listed in the report. Are there any questions?
Questions?
What's the Agricultural Reserve Program? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is.
Ag Reserve.
It's place land that for kind of. Bob, can you explain more?
The
Just
city
in a
essentially
sentence.
buys an easement
Yeah.
over the property so that the property will be utilized for agricultural uses. And there's a time limit on it. However, through that process, there can be exceptions made, which, and city council approved 2 exception building sites so that they can have 3 houses on it. So it is a process of city council,
Yeah.
but even though it was something that they stated when they purchased the rights, when the city purchased the rights of the residential buildings, it still needs a subdivision variance because it still doesn't meet those requirements. So.
Thank you, Bob.
One other quick question. So there are 1 acre building sites, and normally down in the agricultural area, since there's no water and sewer, you need more than an acre to take care of other things like
Septic.
One second.
yeah.
Septic.
So if they were to sell this, are they still going to be able to maintain those
So
requirements?
the proposed lot size, one for parcel 2 is 2.5 acres, and proposed parcel 1 is 4.45 acres. The minimum lot size in any agriculture district is 1 acres.
Okay.
So they exceed that requirement.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Barnes?
Yes, ma'am, since there's no opposition, consent.
Sure.
The next item is Shelley Gail Degenhart. This is a conditional use permit request for a 2-bedroom short-term rental in the OR Oceanfront Resort. The applicant is requesting for indefinite deferral to await for the outcome of the potential changes to the short-term regulation in hope that the conditional use permit for short-term rental will not be required in the OR Oceanfront Resort.
The next item is item number 6. This is a request for a conditional use permit for a short-term rental. This item is located on Arctic Avenue in the Old Beach neighborhood. Please note that in the evaluation section of the staff report, a typo has been corrected to say that this site is west of Arctic Avenue. not Baltic Avenue, as noted in the report. There is a single-family dwelling on the property fronting Arctic Avenue, which received approval of a conditional use permit for a short-term rental in February of 2020. The applicant is proposing to construct an attached three-bedroom dwelling on the west side of the property with vehicle access off of the adjacent 10-foot alley. The applicant will improve the alley along their frontage. The applicant is seeking a short-term rental in the proposed 1,500 square foot unit. Therefore, 3 parking spaces are required. The development plan is in site plan review at this time. Next slide. The proposed unit is planned to be finished in cement fiberboard siding, fiberglass shingles, and has a metal roof on the front porch. Next slide. The applicant is agreeable to the city council recommended conditions of having no more than 1 rental per week and a maximum of 2 occupants per bedroom. Staff has recommended conditions for the layout of the parking and building as well as the elevations. We are not aware of any opposition to this request. Staff recommends approval of the application with the recommended conditions noted in the staff report. Are there any questions?
George?
Consent unless there's any speakers.
I got a question.
Yes.
Why do they have to come in front of us now before they build it? I just don't like proving anything when it's not there yet.
So this is the question where we've kind of gone both ways on. So if you think about other development proposals that get conditional use permits or rezonings, Wawa, other things like that, those things aren't constructed either, so they are based on a proposed plan.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you. There's purpose-built short-term rentals is an issue, which is why I think the approach that's being proposed by council is probably a cleaner approach.
Yeah, I know. All right, just I ask. I knew what the answer was going to be. I just don't like it. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Wawas, things like that. Everything comes in front of us before it's built, but just short-term rentals, in my opinion, are different.
I don't disagree with you at all on that.
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, it's-
But until it becomes part of the ordinance, then, I'll follow y'all's lead.
I mean, what do you think?
Well, first of all, this is kind of an odd, why does it have to be a duplex? Kind of a connected structure? Is there
That's their intent, is they have the land available, it's allowable in the zone, and so they are seeking to maximize the property's value by constructing this addition or second structure, if you will, to create a duplex.
So, Bill, the house is in the front, correct?
Correct, right. The house is
The
in the
pictures
front.
are a
it
little,
fronts Arctic
I
the
actually
Avenue.
drove by
pictures
it.
are backwards, I think.
So this is the existing home on the site, and then if you go
Correct.
to the next one, that's
That's
where
what's
this
behind
addition's,
it.
yes.
That's the rear side of
Right
the
here.
property, which fronts along the
Right.
alleyway.
The end section on the left-hand side, it's going to attach.
Oh, all the way in the back.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
And that's the alley street behind it.
So what you don't see in that photo is the alley. So
See,
the photographer's standing in the alleyway and looking at the rear of the property.
go another road right here.
Oh.
Here's behind the house.
Is it a flag lot, or is it just a double lot?
So here's the alley right here, and we're going to attach it back to
It's
the house.
just
Yeah, go ahead.
it's just a
Just a-
single lot.
What was behind it previously?
I don't think anything, at least like an open field.
Yeah, I can look into that between now and the formal hearing,
Curious.
but I don't know what the previous condition was. Looking at the aerial photograph, it looks like it was probably just vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I think they're just using the benefit that it's already zoned for
Right.
duplex, so.
I said consent, but y'all, I wanted to hear you.
I don't want to, stir up anything. I just don't like doing that. but that's my opinion. I mean, if it's in the ordinance that it meets all requirements, you know, but it hadn't been built yet, but it meets all the requirements. So my opinion, it meets all the requirements in the future, it would go by right anyway. So
True.
no reason to stop it now.
But this is one of those things, though, really, though, that you don't want to put out the money and build it and then say you can't have
Yeah.
it. So-
Sure,
so-
I
so
agree.
you-
I agree.
So you need the approval before you do it.
I agree.
Well, it's not like it couldn't be, used. I mean, it could be a long-term rental. It could be
Home.
it could be a home.
And that, I think that's where we had some issues before. We'd had this conversation, was sort of buying up pieces of property to make them Airbnbs,
With the
short-term rentals.
Sole intent.
That's the only intent for it. It's not, this is a primary residence, this is residential, this is what we're gonna do with this. And so I think that's where we were always kind of trying to figure out how that worked. But I will go with what the body says.
I say consent.
Yeah, I see.
Okay.
Consent.
All right.
Well, that, hold on, before we move forward, because we have another one.
Yeah, I
That
know.
will be,
I know we're coming.
it's going to be the same. It'll set the tone for that one as well.
I know, if it meets the criteria.
You can't change it if it meets the criteria. I mean, what are you gonna do? You just gotta vote what's allowed. I mean, you have to change the ordinance if you're gonna put in some other conditions.
Well, that's sort of,
That's my
yeah,
whole
that's what we're in the
opinion.
middle of
That's-
doing now.
Yeah, so you can talk about it all you want, but the guy's allowed, then he's allowed.
Well, we can still vote
Yeah, we
against
can
it.
still
We don't,
vote
we don't have
against
to. But like you say,
I mean, what standard do you use? I mean, if it says he can do it and you say he can't, I mean, what standard is that?
I will also toss out there for discussion when the planning commission recommended to city council, this isn't the Old Beach overlay. This is in the area that it would be permitted by right, that the commission
I'm getting at.
recommended for approval, or recommended to council.
Say that again, I'm sorry, I didn't catch.
This is in the area, this is east of Baltic,
Baltic.
It's east of Baltic, which is what
Right.
the commission recommended to city council to say you're permitted to do short-term rentals by right in this area. So just, I'll toss that on top of everything else. That is the direction that the commission had given as far as the recommendation moving forward, so.
I agree with that 100%, but it's not built yet. That's my only main concern. But anyway,
Understand.
I'm good. Consent.
All right,
We have Will Miller standing by for the next item, item number 7. Will, please wait 3 seconds before identifying yourself. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So this next case is at, a request is at 205 64th Street in the Lynn Haven District. This is an 8,750 square foot lot located within the R5R Residential District, North End Overlay, and contains one single-family dwelling. According to city records, the home was constructed in 1936. The subject dwelling is not the property owner's primary residence. On-street parking is permitted 24 hours a day. Therefore, any overflow parking beyond the minimum parking space required could occur within the public street. No records of zoning violations relating to short-term rental use were found associated with the subject address. The applicant has agreed with City Council's recently imposed conditions, reducing the number of bookings in a 7-day period to 1 and limiting the overnight guest calculation to 2 per bedroom. Is the slideshow work? I'm not seeing it. Hopefully you guys are seeing the slides. The number of bedrooms in this short-term rental is 3. The number of parking spaces provided on site is 3. We could go to the site plan. That's the floor plan. Let's see if we can get to the site plan. Can we go to the site plan? There we go. The site is located within the North End community, which is primarily home to single-family and duplex dwellings. The subject property sits approximately 500 feet from the entrance to First Landing State Park and approximately 700 feet from the public beaches of the Atlantic Ocean. The applicant's parking plan depicts all 3 required off-street parking spaces located within the existing driveway, which meet the requirements of Section 241.21 of the city zoning ordinance. Based on these considerations, staff recommends approval of this request with the recommended conditions listed in the staff report, which reflect City Council's short-term rental revisions by reducing the number of bookings in a 7-day period to 1 and limiting the overnight guest calculation to 2 per bedroom. There is 1 letter of opposition that was received. The citizen notes his general opposition to short-term rentals in the neighborhood. And according to the applicant, she sent letters to her neighbors and received positive oral responses, but no written responses. That concludes my presentation for this case. I'll stand by to answer any questions you may have. Just to note, I'm actually in the office, so I'm unsure, the city office, I'm unsure if I'm not coming in correctly, why my voice would not be coming through rough or not be coming through very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I am, Mr. Weiner, I'm going to abstain from this application, and I'll state the reason when we get to formal, so I will not be a part of this discussion at this time.
Okay. Questions? Does the person letter of opposition, are they going to be here to speak? You know, they're not, and are they registered to speak?
At this time, we don't have anyone signed
No
up.
registered to speak. It meets all the criteria. I've gone through it. What do y'all,
I agree.
questions?
He meets everything.
It meets everything?
Yeah, I'm good with
Consent?
that.
Yep. Okay, consent it is.
Will, we're ready for you for items number 8 and 9.
From my computer. And hopefully my voice comes in a little bit better. 2002 Baltic Avenue, units A and B. This is in the Beach District. The 7,000 square foot lot is located within the OR Oceanfront Resort Form-Based Code District and currently contains 1 single-family dwelling. The subject dwelling is not the property owner's primary residence. According to city records, the single-family home on the lot was constructed in 1959. However, it is the intent of the applicant to demolish this home and build a duplex. The applicant's representative advised staff of his client's desire to obtain approval for the short-term rental use prior to finalizing a site plan. He explains that the site plan will be modified if approval for the short-term rental use request was not granted. For instance, they would provide less on-site parking if this was not granted. Thus, his clients do not wish to contract with an engineering firm to design a full site plan, since the nature of all conditional use permits contains an element of uncertainty, and site plans, of course, contain an element of cost. The applicant's representative is agreeable to the addition of a recommended condition relating to the development of the site in substantial compliance with the submitted design inspirations and architectural renderings, both of which are found in the staff report and on the PowerPoint. And as you'll see on the design inspirations, it appears to be high-quality material choices. The applicant's representative does not agree with City Council's recently imposed condition reducing the number of bookings in a 7-day period to 1. However, the applicant's representative does agree with City Council's recently imposed condition reducing the overnight guest calculation to 2 per bedroom. The property partially lies within the RPPP boundary, where parking during the evening and overnight hours is limited. However, the 2000 block of Baltic Avenue contains 8 on-street parking spaces outside of the RPPP-controlled area. Based on this, a condition is recommended that would prohibit the occupants of the short-term rental from utilizing the on-street RPPP restriction areas No records of zoning violations relating to short-term rental use were found associated with the subject address. Again, this would end up being a duplex. Unit A would contain 4 bedrooms, and Unit B would also contain 4 bedrooms. Each of the 2 units would contain 4 off-street parking spaces. This site is adjacent to the Vibe Creative District and is surrounded by mostly single-family dwellings and duplex dwellings. However, the lot also sits approximately 100 feet from a partially vacant tract referred to as the Dome site, which will likely be redeveloped in the near future. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing single-family dwelling located on the lot, again, afterward building a duplex, and both units would be used for short-term rental purposes. Now, for clarity, the 2 dwelling units planned for construction will be owned by the applicants named in this request. Submitted parking plan depicts 2 9x18 covered parking spaces that are carport style and 6 9x18 uncovered marked parking spaces. As permitted by Section 241.21 of the City Zoning Ordinance, the zoning administrator reviewed the parking plan and deemed it acceptable. Based on these considerations, staff recommends approval of this request with the conditions listed in the staff report, which reflects City Council's short-term rental revisions by limiting the overnight guest calculation to 2 per bedroom and reducing the number of bookings in a 7-day period to 1. 3 letters of support were received and 1 letter of opposition. The letter of opposition came from one of the duplex units next door to the subject property to the west. The letter notes concerns with the effect of short-term rentals on property values and use compatibility in general, alongside long-term residents. This concludes my presentation for this case. I'll stand by to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right. George, this is you.
Huh?
Do you want to start?
Well, I was wanting to consent unless you guys want to discuss the week, the 1 week or 2 week, 2 per week, but I'm on consent. It's in that area it's in the OR district. Guys tell me.
I will say one thing. I like this. We're actually seeing architectural renderings of what the building's going to look like before we saw a pencil drawing. That wasn't, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I know this is exactly what's in the area, what's being built. It's in the area. It fits in the neighborhood perfect. It's in the OR district. I agree 100%. But the only thing I have an issue with, I'm only going to support one rental per week.
Yeah, that's, and it's unfortunate that this applicant, I wish they would go ahead and do that, but this is definitely, I feel strongly about not changing that. We haven't,
We do it for them, we got to do it for
we got to
everybody
do it
else.
for everybody, and that's not what council is asking us to do.
It's not going that way.
What are we doing on the overlay that we proposed to city council? Is it 2?
It's 1.
It would be one, yeah.
It's
one on
one
the
per week, and right now it's 1 per week, and is it 2 per?
2 per bedroom.
2 per bedroom. So that's where we are with that. And it's a beautiful building. I didn't quite understand where Will was with the letter of opposition, because I know, Bill, you and I had walked that piece of property with Kevin.
Right.
And we'd looked at that duplex behind, and it's hard to understand, Will, what exactly the letter, I guess I could read it, couldn't I?
Mr. Zahn, so across the board, everything is 1 per week?
That is the condition that's currently being imposed by city council. I'm going to look at the
Overlays,
I'm going to look at the overlays right now, if you give me a moment.
CUPs, everything is,
The proposed overlays does have that provision to change it, but I need to make sure it also includes OR, so let me read through it one more time.
I can't.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Well, until everything else goes through.
Yeah, we have to stick with what we're doing.
We got to stick with what we're doing.
we
We
gotta be
can't
consistent.
go,
In my opinion, we need to be consistent with what we're doing. they want to defer and come back after the ordinance is done, they can do that.
Oh. The change actually goes to a total number of rental contracts they're allowed to do per year versus stating that they can only do one per,
How many
So-
a year?
52.
That's one.
There you go, it's 1 away.
It's 1 a week. But it does give them flexibility.
Oh, so they can, yeah, during the season.
But again, that's just what you'll see, that's being proposed by the council members. The current condition that's being imposed is the 1 rental per week.
If
I think
they
they-
wanted to come, let's say they got that condition and, their application was approved, is it 6 months that they would have to wait to come back?
Well, if there's no conditional use permit, essentially, I guess,
No conditional use.
all right, they would have the ability to give up their conditional use permit and go with what regulations are in place at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So it's gonna be a by right?
George, did you read the letter?
No, I did
That might,
Do I have that? Sorry.
it's beautiful, without a doubt.
Yeah. I just don't think we can change it until anything else changes. I mean, we can't just come up with that now,
If the council
know?
wants to change it,
then
then
they can change it.
they can change it.
But we need to be consistent in what we're doing, my opinion. The only thing I can think of is to hear it and let the attorney,
Condition anyway. I'm used to when you have an ordinance in hand or you start the process, you stick with your process until it's
Thank you.
done.
And they're right.
So,
I mean, we can approve it on a consent for 1 per week, as we can do, pass it on to council. We can have the attorney,
Well,
We could hear it.
I don't think we can approve it, because they're not willing to
I
accept
don't think we
that.
should either. I think we have to hear it.
So we'll just hear it. All right,
I do have one question for.
Yeah.
So this is actually for staff, and maybe, I don't know if Will's still on. The architectural, I mean, I think it looks good. It is a little interesting. There are two things about the architecture and the elevation views. One is that it seems like it has that third story seems a little odd with the dark siding. I'm not sure how that's going to be represented. It doesn't seem to be represented all that well in the elevation views. But I guess the staff's opinion that would be acceptable, whatever that third story part is to the whole overall look of the building.
It does sit differently, but yes, staff doesn't have
Quite
that
the
much.
same architectural features
Not
that.
the same. Since you're hearing it, it may be worth discussing with the representative
Okay, that sounds
applicant.
good. And another thing is, and I'm sure it'll look fine, but it doesn't seem to be the typical coastal or Virginia architecture that you might see. Looks more like a New Orleans, the New Deeper South type of architecture.
Right, the applicant did say that's where they pulled their design inspiration from.
Okay, and it's just an inspiration for their sign. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
okay.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Okay, the first one of mine on the agenda for today is JKS Proponent Properties LLC, located at 304 28th Street, Unit 209. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit for, at this condominium located in the Playa Rana condominiums, zoned OR Oceanfront District. The condominium unit has 2 bedrooms. Each condo unit has 2 assigned parking spaces on site. Since the property is within the boundary of the residential parking permit program, parking passes issued for the subject dwelling unit will be limited to 2 resident passes Guest and temporary passes will not be permitted while the conditional use permit is active. The applicant can reasonably meet all the requirements of Section 241.2 of the zoning ordinance for short-term rental use. The applicant is agreeable to the recent city council condition changes, reducing the number of weekly rentals in a 7-day period from 2 to 1, and the maximum number of guests after 11 p.m. from 3 to 2. No letters of support or opposition have been received.
I know you said the code, everything met, but parking's good?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Consent.
Consent.
Yep.
The next agenda item is Rachel Panariel at 911 Pacific Avenue, Unit A. The applicant is requesting to operate a short-term rental in a 2-bedroom unit within a condominium development. There are 2 bedrooms in this condominium unit, thus 2 parking spaces are required. 1 parking space is accommodated on-site and has its own designated space. To satisfy the second parking requirement, the applicant has submitted a letter of intent to lease a parking space at the 9th Street parking garage, which is located directly across the street. The zoning administrator has reviewed this alternative parking plan and deemed it acceptable. All other requirements of Section 241.2 of the zoning ordinance pertaining to short-term rentals can be reasonably met. The applicant is agreeable to the recent city council condition changes, reducing the number of weekly rentals from 2 to 1 and the maximum number of occupants after 11 p.m. from 3 to 2. And no letters of opposition or support have been received. I'll stand by for questions.
Consent.
All right, anybody have any questions? This whole building's going that way.
This is a 5,000 square foot parcel zoned R5D residential in the Red Wing subdivision. Carol Davis at 1305 Chickadee Lane. All 3 spaces are accommodated on-site with 2 in the driveway and 1 in the garage. The zoning administrator has reviewed this alternative parking plan and deemed it acceptable. All other requirements of Section 241.2 of the zoning ordinance regulating short-term rentals can be reasonably met by the applicant. The applicant is agreeable with the recent condition changes from City Council. Staff has received 1 letter of opposition, citing concerns with short-term rental tenants as it relates to trash, noise level, and then the general nature of short-term rentals. And I'll stand by for questions.
Yeah, this is.
I've got a couple.
Jack?
Yep. So the application is from, or the opposition is from someone who lives adjacent to, looks like 1302.
Correct.
As opposed to 1305. Now, this is typically not in an area where you would see short-term rentals. And it looks like, according to the planning staff, that the city council is considering, limiting in the near future the ability to operate short-term rentals outside of certain areas. And this would certainly be in that area that would be limited. I'm not necessarily opposed to this at this time, but I would like to hear it and hear from the applicant.
Is there opposition going to be here?
I have not heard that opposition will be here. Marshall, have you received
No, we haven't had anyone sign up yet.
just a letter?
Okay. Yep. Yeah, I'd still like to hear it.
Okay.
Okay, my final application for today is GG Property Management LLC, located at 713 Northgate Court. This parcel is approximately 7,347 square feet and zoned R 7.5 residential. This single-family dwelling is located in the Princess Anne Plaza neighborhood. Assessor's records indicate this dwelling has 5 bedrooms, thus 5 on-site parking spaces are required. There is an existing 9-foot by 33-foot driveway that is used for parking. Additional parking is accommodated on a concrete pad on the side of the dwelling that is connected to the driveway with gravel ground cover. It is the applicant's intention to widen the existing driveway apron to accommodate additional parking spaces. If this request is granted, a condition is recommended that requires the placement of the driveway addition and apron within 60 days of the City Council public hearing. The applicant has submitted an alternative parking plan that shows these proposed improvements, including 3 on-site spaces and 2 spaces partially within the right-of-way. As the two spaces within the right-of-way do not block vehicular or pedestrian traffic, the zoning administrator has deemed this plan acceptable. Staff believes that all other requirements of Section 241.2 of the zoning ordinance pertaining to short-term rentals can be reasonably met. The applicant is agreeable to the recent city council condition changes. No letters of opposition or support have been received. I'll stand by for questions.
Okay.
So this would be the same, I think.
You want to hear it? Yeah. Okay. We're going to hear this as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kemp?
Good morning, Commission. All right, the last four items, items 14 through 17, are for a short-term rental for 4 units as part of a multifamily complex right on Norfolk Road near the ocean front. I'm going to do my best to go through this. I know you went out and visited the site, and there's, in your supplemental package, you have a new staff report in which we recommend approval versus the original recommendation of denial. That can be somewhat confusing. I've given myself a crash course because this has been, a discussion for months now. So I will go through it, go through staff's evaluation of the process, and then stand by for questions should you have them. So this request for 4 units, all located in a building that was built a long time ago in 1940. The adjacent properties to the west and south have all been redeveloped. There was a redevelopment plan submitted to our Development Service Center in 2013 that redeveloped the property directly to the left and the properties behind. This property was not included in that redevelopment plan, although it should be noted that the applicant does plan on redeveloping the property in the future. The lot itself, what's left that hasn't been redeveloped, is 5,010 square feet. Here we see a picture of the front of the dwelling. As I mentioned, the request is for all 4 units in the building, units 1, 2, 4, and 5. Don't be confused, there is no unit 3. I wish I knew a reason, but I do not. The units, unit 1 is 2 bedrooms, all others are 1 bedroom for a total of 5 bedrooms included with this request. These pictures show the current condition of the property. The picture on the right shows a gravel area in front of the dwelling. This was part of, and I'll get into it in more detail, part of the conversation in which our earlier recommendation was denial. Staff was not able to establish where this gravel was installed in the right-of-way legally. Additionally, in 2013, when the DSC approved the plans for the redevelopment of the other lots, it was noted on those approved plans that this gravel will be restored to its original state, which was grass. The applicant is agreeable to that restoration. And again, as far as the parking, you can see by that car how the site is currently or has been parked in the past, where the cars have just pulled off Norfolk into that gravel area, which, for the use of the dwelling right now, which has been for long-term rentals, isn't legal, but that will be corrected with this request. Here are further pictures. The picture on the left, you can see the back where there is parking provided. And now I will take you through the journey of parking. As I described, that area in the front, existing gravel to be removed. The proposal requires 5 parking spaces. What the applicant has done is modified the parking plan to include 6 spaces to the rear of the building. This is the most recent parking plan that was submitted. You will note there are 2 spaces parallel in front of the dwelling. Those are not required for this request. It was more put on there as a demonstration that there is room to accommodate 2 more parking spaces, although they are not required. Just to give you an idea where it came from, this was the first parking plan that was submitted. This was brought to our office in which our staff reviewed this and said it was not deemed acceptable. Then there were a couple alternatives brought forward. This was one alternative. Again, the parking in the right-of-way in front of Norfolk, staff did not feel was acceptable, and went with this alternative. Let's see. So that is the generation of parking. There has been one letter of opposition from an adjacent property owner. The main concerns are that the short-term rental is not compatible with the neighborhood, the adjacent neighbors, which are all year-round residents. Mentions that it's more like bringing a hotel into a residential neighborhood, and worries about negative impacts due to trash, parking, noise, and a revolving door of renters. This is in an area of city where short-term rentals is common. There are approximately 65 registered short-term rentals shown there, with 6 in review and 3 have already been approved. This is currently not being rented or advertised as a short-term rental, and staff has received no complaints on the property, and has, as you see in the supplement, recommended approval of the request. Now I'll stand by for questions, as I imagine there will be.
Kevin,
Yes, ma'am.
so let's go, do you mind going back to the photo of the back of the house? We're currently, we basically have a double driveway going in from Norfolk Avenue, and then right there, and then I guess you hang a left and you go behind the building, right there.
Yes.
How are you supposed to get 6 cars back there? I'm
Um,
just curious, are they just gonna, are they gonna park up against the house and the fence
Yes,
and pave it all?
It's a stacked parking. It will require some additional paving, not much, but some additional paving to get that 27 feet across to accommodate the 3 cars, and then the 18 back will accommodate that stacked.
And if you stack, I'm just curious, because I have a lot of people that live at my house. If you stack 6 cars back there, how are they supposed to get in and out?
Well, the thought is that because the units are, when you're stacking, one unit would have that 2 cars, the stack that they would coordinate with the other renters in the unit, noting that the other units are 1 bedroom and there's only 5 spaces required. So hopefully the units would not be stacking behind where, if unit 1 would not be stacking behind where unit 2 is parking. Because that's a situation exactly where, when we look at it, is not favorable.
So, all right, and I just walk me back through, because when we went out here, how many units are in the building?
4 units in the building,
There are 4 units.
correct?
And are they all 1 bedroom?
No, 3 of the units are 1 bedroom and 1 unit is 2 bedroom.
So there's a potential of 4 people in one and 2
Correct.
people in the other.
Correct.
I just can't get there from here.
And I will note also that, when staff re-examine this, we did so on a consistency basis, as you've discussed today. All parking is accommodated on site, and that's how we have traditionally looked at these properties.
I've got one question.
Yes, Mr. Costa.
Can they feasibly make that left turn? I think I pulled in the driveway, and I don't see how anybody can make that left turn and stay in the lane closest to the building.
It may require some maneuvering, but, I have not yet tried that myself, so I can't answer that with certainty.
And you said they can't use the front because it's in the right of way?
Well, they can't use the front as was originally shown. However, on their approved parking plan, they show that there is room for a car to come in off that front. If you look at the picture of the front, to come in and pull around in front of that dwelling.
In between the telephone pole and the porch?
Yes,
Is
there
where they're
is,
supposed to park?
there is room for 2 parking spaces in that area. And again, those parking spaces on this approved plan were shown as just a demonstration of there is more area on the site. but all the required parking can be provided behind the dwelling.
We are going to hear this, correct? Don't we have speakers?
Yeah, we do have speakers signed up in opposition.
Okay.
Not that I'm stopping you or anything, I just.
No, no,
so
please.
You can keep right on going.
Yeah.
Keep on.
No, I'm going at your discretion.
So, so I'm just gonna ask this because we're informal now.
Yes.
And then I won't have to ask it informal because you'll answer it now. The illegal parking that they have right now, which is parallel parking, and it does have an apron, but they're not, I guess they're not supposed to have it, I'm not quite sure. I can't remember what Kevin said out there. That's more reasonable than what is proposed of stacking 6 cars and 2 cars against a porch. And I get how you've done that. I just don't see how. So there's no way that they can use that city easement, can they? To use it as parallel parking. I mean, I'm not trying to deny him just to be denying him. I'm just trying to be realistic about a bunch of cars trying to squeeze into a piece of property that
Right.
doesn't seem possible. I mean, I can't imagine being in that building and being in apartment number 1 and then accidentally being the first one in the slot and then having to knock on doors and ask the other people to please move their cars.
Right.
Madam Chair, that may be more of a, I think you've drawn, well, I believe you're pointing to facts that may answer your question as far as if you believe this use is appropriate or not, so.
Okay.
And I will, just to give you some background, when that first plan came in that showed the parking in that gravel area, the concerns of staff on that particular parking, as you can see, it may be more feasible. The concerns were, that there is a sidewalk down there, that Norfolk is a heavily trafficked road, how people would access the site to get into that parking area. Those were all things that were brought into consideration. Now, when we look at these applications, of course, if there's a way to bring that parking out of the right-of-way, we encourage that versus the parking that remained in. That, in addition to that gravel was supposed to be removed as per the 2013 plan that was approved by DSC. That all weighed into not really considering that as an option for that gravel to remain.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Kemp? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
It for the briefings, Madam Chair? That's it for the briefings?
That's it. All right. Well, if there is no more, then we will,
Go for this
oh, we have to
yourself.
do a couple of things here.
Marcel, can I go through this with you real quick?
Sure.
Deferral, item 1, and for 30 days, 5 indefinite.
Yes.
Consent items 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 10, and 11.
Yes.
And then hearing 8, 9, 10, or 8, 9, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I need a person to do the prayer and somebody to lead the pledge, please.
I'll do the pledge.
Thank you, Jack. And somebody to read the prayer, please?
I can read a prayer,
Can you read a prayer? Thank you. You can,
I'm in trouble, right?
well, you can do it. If you prefer not to use that, you may do the other. And I guess that's it. We're all done? Is that it?
Announcements.
We have,
Introductions.
oh, introductions. I need someone to do the introductions. George, you want to do that?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
I have a cheat sheet. I'll print it for you.
Okay, and then we are adjourned for the informal.